one episode in about 1968. The company bought WBT, the NBC affiliate in Richmond, and Crutches, he was better known, Mr. Crutchfield to me, wanted me to go up and be the general manager, and they were buying it from Lowers Tobacco Company. And so Mary Lou and I went up there. We had 5 kids, 10 and under at that time.
Oh my.
9 and under at that time. And so we went up and we went around and we looked, and both her mother and my mother were relatively dependent on us for assistance of various kinds. And so we found it a little stiff for us, to be honest. So on the plane on the way back, I said, I got to tell Crutch in the morning. He's going to be waiting for me. What do you want to do? She said, well, I'll do whatever you want to do. I said, well, I know what we both want to do, and that's not go. She said, that's right. I said, okay, fine. So I went and see Crutch the next morning and told him that we appreciated the opportunity, but we didn't want to go. And I was honest with him about why I didn't want to go. And I said, but I'm prepared to leave. I don't want to put you in embarrassment. Don't be silly. You're not going to embarrass me. I said, well, I can see where it would be. Well, about a year and a half later, he calls me into his office on a Friday. And incidentally, I'm casual. He was never casual. Always coat and tie, even on Sunday when he was the only one in the building. And he also expected all of his officers to wear a coat and tie in their office, no matter whether there's anybody around or not. So he always looked at me kind of, in terms of being not following rules well enough as far as attire was concerned. So he says, right as soon as I walked in and sat down, he said, I want you to go to Richmond. I said, when? He said, Monday morning. I said, for how long? He said, 3 years. I said, okay. And I went home, and we were having a party that weekend, and so we told our friends we were moving to Richmond. Mary Lou the same way. I said, I'm going to Richmond Monday, and you're going to be coming later. She said, what for? I said, we're moving there. And she was true. She said, okay, no discussion, that's fine. And so I commuted starting on 1st of December of that year until July of the next year.
Wow.
And because we had to find a place to live, and we didn't want to take our kids out of school, all that kind of stuff. So we moved up there on July the 7th. And at the same time I'm leaving, we just barely got into a brand new house, and I bought her a brand new untrained dachshund, which of course thrilled the kids and delighted her in different ways. But as I'm leaving, literally leaving to go to the ACC meeting at in the mountains at Grandfather Golf and Country Club, that's where Chesley, where he had his meetings with ACC people. The water heater in our attic overflowed and crashed down through 2 of our bedrooms.
Oh my gosh!
As I'm leaving, so this will tell you what a great wife she was. She allowed me to go anyhow. So anyhow, we did that.
That is a great wife.
So we're up there. We move in July, and Labor Day I'm coming back to Charlotte for the meeting, and Tom Cookley asked me to come by his house. He was the general manager of BTV still, and he says, I got news for you. I said, what's that? He said, I'm going to resign tomorrow. I said, tomorrow? He said, yeah. He said he was going to work running All Britain Communications. So anyhow, he said, Crutch is probably going to want to bring you back. I said, oh my gosh, I just got there, Well, that's what happened. So I now commute back to Charlotte for 10 months from Richmond, but having a very strong and understanding wife made it all possible. Wow. So in any event, moving ahead, I was fortunate enough to be there long enough that when Wally retired as president, I became executive vice president in 1978 when Crutch retired, and Wally was the president. And when he retired, happily for me, the parent company promoted me to president, and that's how I stayed until I left there and retired in '91 to try and buy a Gray communication company, which didn't work out, obviously. Anyhow, I went into business for myself. I got a call from Tom Cookley, who was in business with Outlet Communications, David Henderson, who was president, CEO. They were good friends. He said, and they had a radio station down Hilton Head together. He said, I just tried to get a hold of Dave Henderson, and he just dropped dead of a heart attack in his office. I said, oh my God. They were a big client of ours. Stuff that happened down through the years, the JP Sports was one thing. We started a data services company, Jefferson Data Services, which did inventory control and backroom operations of all kind. And we started another little company called Co-Opportunities, and we actually bought a company in Australia, and opened up offices in Europe for the data services company, and started serving agencies. We bought a company that did agency stuff in New York. So we had a kind of organic growth and that type thing. So anyhow, this client, Outlet, was one of our major clients. And so I got a call a couple of weeks after I left Jefferson and asked me if I would help them find somebody to replace David. I said, well, I'll be glad to try, but you got a headhunter, they're probably capable of doing it. And so I said, if I'm gonna be in New York in a couple of weeks, I'll be glad to come offer whatever I can offer. So I did, and so I agreed to help them try to find somebody. And about the third meeting with them, they said, we've got a better idea. I said, what's that? I said, we want you to come. I said, well, I wasn't really excited about going to Providence, Rhode Island, to be candid. And so in any event, as time moved along there, I agreed to go for 2 years. And we were going to move up there, and we went looking for condos and that kind of thing. But again, family situation with my mother-in-law, I knew it was going to be tough on Mary Lou. She's a twin sister, and she didn't want her twin sister doing all the work. So I said, you just stay here and I'll commute. I'm going to be on the road most of the time, no big problem. So it started that process, and 2 years became 5 years, and it was a wonderful experience. I worked for people who were warning me about going to work for these Wall Street sharks. They were the one that bought Avis and came up with, we're number 2, and that kind of stuff. But they were a fabulous group of men, very bright, very talented, very successful, and so it turned out to be a wonderful experience, both from an operational point of view and reporting to them. Happily they had guys who had a good sense of humor. I saw where one of them, he was a big sports fan. He had gone to Lehigh, but he was at Seton Hall, very involved with Seton Hall. And Carolina was playing Seton Hall in the Meadowlands. So he goes, how about us having a gentlemanly bet? I said, well, how much, what are you talking about? He said, how about $10? I said, you're on, no problem. And so later, one of the other board members sent me an article where he had just given $25 million to Lehigh. And well, Carolina beat Seton Hall, and so we're at our meeting in February in New York, and so I want to congratulate Frank on his very generous contribution to Lehigh, and I said, but he is a little slow on paying off his personal debts. And so he reaches in his pocket, takes a $10 out across the thing. So, but see how things work. His daughter after we sold the company in 1996, and I was back in Charlotte, I got a call from him one day, and he said, Jim, Frank Walsh here. I said, Frank, how are you? He said, great. He said, I got a slight problem. See if you can help me. I said, well, if I can, you know I will. He said, yes, my daughter has applied to the School of Social Work at Chapel Hill, but she thinks she made a mistake on her application and checked off part-time. She wants to be a full-time student. I said, well, I think we can find out about that in one call. I was on their advisory board and been involved with them, with Charles Kuralt, whose named after the new building, his father, and Jack Tate from here in Charlotte. And anyhow, so I called the dean, and he said, no problem. So we'd love to have her here. So she goes, and her husband's getting his MBA at Duke, so it worked out great. So we're now trying to raise some money at School of Social Work. So I called Frank up, knowing his son was at Duke, and said, would love for you all to come down for the Duke Carolina game. It was in Chapel Hill.
Wow.
So he readily agreed to do it, and took him, and we got to spend time with Dean, and we obviously met with the School of Social Work people and told them what was going on there. He leaves and sends a check for $100,000.
Oh my gosh.
They have been strong supporters, both he, his wife, and son-in-law, ever since. This is quite some time ago now. Well, back 1996, I think, when they came down, 97. Anyhow, so there are a lot of good experience that came out of that opportunity there. I mentioned Charles Kuralt, and Charles and I were at Central High School together. We ran track together, and then he so once he was in Charlotte, and I was speaking to a big group, they asked me to introduce him. So I said, I'd be flattered to do so. So I did, and I did the usual stuff. At the very end, I said, Charles is more than a friend, and we ran track together, and we were together at Chapel Hill, and he did the first story on color TV for me when he was at the Charlotte News. And so you can't believe how much I respect him, how much I care about him. And I said, as a matter of fact, before I go to bed every night, I thank God for Charles Kuralt. And I looked, Charles was quite an emotional guy. He was tearing up. I said, because he kept me from being the slowest 100-yard dash man in the state. So so I was able to do it one other time. He was speaking out Belmont Abbey, and they asked me to do it again, commencement speaker. And a cut came at it from a slightly different angle. Anyhow, people like him in the business was great. To sum it up here, I cannot believe what a lucky life I've led. And wherever I've been, in Charlotte, Richmond, Providence, I've always had the tremendous good fortune to be engaging with really people that were bright, talented, and wonderful human beings. I can honestly say, and all this time, I haven't come across 5 clinkers. I'm so proud that at BTV we started the first minority training program. I'm happy to say that 2 of those recruits and graduates, one is Bill Whitaker, who's now, I think most people agree, the lead anchor reporter on 60 Minutes, and Ron Allen, who's I think now in the Mideast in Asia for NBC, but a host of other terrific people, some still in Charlotte here. Guy that I ended up going to business with on a satellite truck. And so it's been a spectacular experience for me. And I say all that because, unfortunately, the fun is slowly but surely draining out of the business for a lot of people. Anyone thinks that big is better is wrong, in my opinion. Big is not better. In many cases, big is bad. The growth and the getting away from local ownership, the thing that's appealed to me so much about Hackl communication. I started out just a routine, doing some consultant work for Beverly, and then she asked me to come full time, is that it is locally owned. I don't have to go to 10 layers to get a decision made. I go 20 yards down the hall to the owner operator, founder, who was founded by our father. But it's gotten a lot more complicated. The whole world's gotten complicated. It's not just broadcasting. I think broadcasting, though, is suffered a lot as a result of it. The giant companies are not good competitors. The networks are extremely difficult to negotiate with. And let me say, I'm saying this representing Jim Babb only. I'm not representing anybody else's thoughts. These are my experiences, my personal experiences. So it's become a grinding business. Creativity is at a low ebb, and it's sad. And of course, the technological changes. We're in the process of getting 6 new transmitter facilities for our 6 owned stations. That's a $12 million capital improvement.
A lot of money.
It won't add 1 penny to the bottom line. It will not even make the pictures better for most of our viewers. So if that were the case, which when we converted to digital, that was the case back in the 1990s.
Yeah.
That was a big advancement, and that was certainly a technological advance that was good. So anyhow, it's certainly a different business, and though I still have a lot of good friends in the business and certainly within the company, marvelous people, creative people, hardworking people, loyal people. It's been a treat for me to have that opportunity down through the years.
And I think it's fair to say for people that watch this now and for years to come that WBTV Radio was the first radio station in North Carolina.
Goes back to 1922.
Yes.
The first station on the East Coast. That was a fun experience working there for radio. We had such good coverage up and down the East Coast that once we did a radio show out of Pompano Beach, Florida, the Sandy Shoe Festival. They asked us to come down from Charlotte to Pompano Beach, Florida,
wow.
which we did, and it was great. And so, yes, it was, and of course, WBTV was the first TV station, went on air in 1949, July, almost, well, I think July the 15th, I think, of
that is correct.
1949. So we're exactly, on the anniversary mark there. It's just been a fabulous experience. I wouldn't trade it for anything, but I also would be a bit reluctant to advise my own children to get into it now.
I think another interesting fact about WBTV is when it went on the air, according to some sources, there were only 1,000 TV sets in Charlotte when BTV went on the air. Yeah. And after BTV went on the air, in the first day, there was an average of 50 television sets sold in Charlotte each and every day for the first year.
Well, you brought up a statistic I was unaware of. Well, it's a little known fact, and it would probably surprise most people. I was one of the early stars of prime time on WBTV. I mentioned earlier I had been on television more than a dozen times in the time I've been in the business, but creativity was a very low ebb when it first started. So, and I think in 49, certainly 1950, Thursday night prime time, 8 o'clock show with Central High School, Wildcat film highlights in black and white, 16 millimeter. You can imagine what a great picture that presented. So we had a good time with that. But we were on every Thursday night for a while there. The good news is, the thing that I do miss is and a wonderful friend, collaborator, one of the most talented people I've known by the name of Lunas McGlowan. Lunas, a good East Carolina guy, and they have all this archive. Brilliant songwriter, lyricist, arranger, wrote and did things for Frank Sinatra, Billie Holiday, etc. Well, he had a show on as well called Nocturne, a local music show with a quartet. And somebody just recently passed away, unfortunately, Bob Rayford, who was quite well known with most recently his John Boy and Billy radio show all over the South. But Rayford was quite a character, and he was the announcer there, which brought up another interesting thing. I've complained a little bit about where things are in broadcast, but it's also boring now. It's dull. There aren't any really interesting people, I'm sorry to say. But back in those days, there was an episode, Nat King Cole in Birmingham, where he was booed on the stage at the thing there. And there was some other physical things happened, not a physical attack per se, as I recall, but certainly I don't recall all the details there. But Bob Rayford was outraged by that. And he had a nighttime show on WBTV Radio. And so he was going to go on the air about that night. Well, the then Vice President General Manager of WBTV, a man by the name of Ken Treadwell, I forget why Bob Covington, who was same job at radio, didn't do it, who was also a fabulous human being. He told him not to. Well, he further complicated things by going down to Central High School and interviewing students to see what they thought about it. Well, that was a no-no, going on a high school campus, back in those days. It still is, I assume. And but he went down there, and he went on the air that night with some of these interviews, and Ken Treadwell called up in the middle of the broadcast and told him to sign off there, get off the show, which he did. And but Rayford, he was very passionate about it. Think about how long ago this was that he had that kind of passion about injustice to a black entertainer. So he was ahead of his times on that type thing. But he was a character in other ways. I don't mean just as far as civil rights situation concerned. He was just he went to New York, and when he went to WTOP in Washington, and threw a firecracker in the studio, so he got fired there, of course. He ended up at WNBC in New York, and he also had a failing there. But when I went to New York, I loved being with him because he got in all the jazz clubs. He's a big jazz fan, as am I. And when we got in, we were treated well, right up front, and things. So when Bob came back to Charlotte, he, as I say, he jumped out of airplanes, rode a motorcycle. I'm talking about in his 80s. I'm not talking about in his 30s or 40s. So quite a character. And they're just not, I don't know any characters anymore.
Not like that. Let's talk for a minute about Hackl Communications.
Okay.
You've weathered some storms here, and one was the change in network affiliations in this market.
I did.
When you were here and lost the Fox affiliation.
That's correct.
Talk a little bit about that. That was a pretty tough situation.
This is one of the things I was referring to earlier about dealing with the networks. I will say Beverly's father, Beverly Hackl Poston, is present CEO, and she's represent the 6 siblings, and she is, as I say, she has only vote count, so we don't have to waste a lot of energy. She's for it, we do it. She's not for it, we don't do it. Pretty simple. And let me say, she's hardly ever against something that you feel strongly about, and for the benefit of the company. Mr. Hackl, we were friendly competitors, and when I was running the outlet company in Providence, I had to refinance the company there. We called it the 3 R's: refinance, retransmission, and relocate. We moved into new studios, refinanced the company, and started our first retrans things at that point. But anyway, I got to my road show on refinancing the company, and I got back to the office. There was something in one of the trade presses that we had refinanced, outlets refinanced, whatever. So I'm sitting in my office and I get a call, and my secretary says, associate said, Mr. I said, Bay Hackl? She said, yeah. So from Si, how you doing? He said, Jim, I'm fine. How you doing? I said, I'm doing fine, Si. And he once before tried to ask me to come to work for him when he was going to run for Congress to come run the company when I was at Jefferson. I wasn't in a position to even think about it. So I said, I'm fine. He said, I see you refinanced the company. He said, I'd be interested in how you did that. I said, well, Si, you're in luck. I've got the dog and pony show sitting right here, the book sitting right on my desk. I'm going to FedEx it to you today. I'm going to send you a list of all the people I call on from Boston to Los Angeles, San Francisco to Miami, and I'm going to tell you what they bought. And he said, really? I said, yeah. I said, I'll send it to you, and when you get it, I'm home every Friday afternoon usually. I can stay over till Monday morning. Just let me know, and I'll be glad to come talk to you about it. And so I did, and so he called me back and said, you going to be home this Friday? I said, I am. He said, how about lunch? I said, okay. I wasn't planning on coming till afternoon. I can come home in the morning. So I did, and we met and went over the detail. And once again, he asked me if I'd come to work for him. And I said, well, Si, I can't. He said, why? I said, well, I have a contract. He said, well, I'll buy the contract out. I said, Si, you don't understand. I don't want it bought out. we were growing the company, and I had a position in the company, and whatever it ended up, I knew ultimately it was going to be a sale. So I was at that point I had too much invested time-wise. But anyhow, Si had the greatest eye for value of anybody I've ever known in the business. I mean, he's got a gem of a TV operation in Jackson, Tennessee, halfway between Nashville and Memphis. Who in the world would have thought about buying a station out there, right between these two major markets? He was smart enough to buy the CBS affiliate in Selma, Alabama, back in the early 80s, and smart enough to move it to Montgomery. Much better recognition deal. He had radio stations and bought a radio station in Pueblo, Colorado. Who would ever have thought about buying that? Moved it to Colorado Springs where we had a station. So he was really way ahead of his time on that. He was among the very first to sign up with Rupert Murdoch for the Fox network and was a strong supporter. And this is in all honesty, again, I'm speaking for Jim Babb only and not for anybody else associated with Bay Hackl or anybody else for that matter. All the CBS, all the Fox contracts have a clause in it that if you have an affiliation agreement and they buy a station in the market, they can take it in 6 months. So that's what happened. My good friend Jim Goodman and Raleigh, obviously at that point had CBS and Fox, and so they came and bought his two stations in Charlotte, the CW and My TV, and they paid him, in my opinion, the paltry sum of $18 million for two TV stations in the nation's 22nd market. Furthermore, they just recently sold in the Spectrum auction the weakest of the two stations for $70 million. They canceled our affiliation agreement, and primarily because of the Panthers are in Charlotte, and they got that, and they could leverage that in other ways. Anyway, there was no breakup fee, and I think this is immoral, unethical, and should be illegal. That they can come take your affiliation agreement that you've been, it's a two-way street. Obviously, they were helping Si and Charlotte, but also Si was helping them. We had a great news operation here. Not all the Fox affiliates did. Super good, well-run TV station. Way before I got here, so I'm not taking any credit for it. Extremely well-run by John Hutchinson, who I consider one of the smartest, brightest, if not the best I've ever worked with. A superb television station, and they just came in, canceled it. We're taking over July the 1st, again, it's definitely immoral and unethical. It should, in my mind, be illegal. I think the contract should have a breakup fee in there of some sort. You establish by independent sources what the value of the station is with this affiliation agreement. You have to pay something for it. But obviously that's not the case. Same things happen with in Indianapolis with another really well-run TV station, WISH, WISH. They lost their CBS affiliation agreement. So it's very much a one-way street now. Negotiation is not in the cards. Nobody negotiates. You have a pretty straightforward deal, and you either take it or you do something else.
Well, but you bounced back and did very well even after that.
You know, again, I will say I have been so fortunate. I've already said over and over again, but it's worth repeating. The best staff here, many of them used to work for us with us at Jefferson Pilot. Almost our entire senior management team, we worked together at Jefferson Pilot. And our engineering staff is almost exclusively from guys that work for us at WBTV and other roles at Jefferson Pilot, all in key roles. And the sales department here is absolutely the best I've ever worked with. And I'm not comparing them bad sales staffs. I've been blessed to have really good sales staffs wherever I've been, just blessed to have good people, smart people, hardworking people, motivated people. And but this group here, and they have done a spectacular job. John Hutchinson, in managing it and creatively, is brilliant. And but our news director, Angie Robbins, she used to work for us at Jefferson Pilot, done a splendid job. So it couldn't have been done without this quality of people.
That makes all the difference. Let's talk a little bit about your association with North Carolina Association of Broadcasters. You were active.
I was blessed. Again, I got on the board. I forget. I was back in. There was a little tension between radio and TV back in the early days. I didn't experience it all, but I experienced some of it. And but anyhow, I forget who invited me to come on the board. But I knew they weren't well enthusiastic about having a lot of TV people on there, especially from the bigger markets. and so I wasn't very smart, but I could recognize that. But anyway, I went on the board, and I can't recall the process, but ultimately I ended up being president. And I was flattered because they weren't looking for TV guys to be president back in those days. But of course, as I mentioned earlier, Wade Hargrove was the acting. I mean, he was it. He was the director. He did it all. I think he had maybe just one key assistant at that time at the law firm. But Wade was just a super good guy, super smart guy, and so we had some challenges. Interestingly, Jim Hunt was running for governor, and Jim's family was a little concerned about the programming on television, better known as sex and violence back in those days. And we had some challenging discussions about that, and we took some fairly strong stand, and Wade was the mastermind behind that and directed it. But out of that, I developed a keen sense of respect, appreciation, and fondness for he and Sandy. And we did a lot of wonderful trips together to NCAB. So NCAB was my first venture into industry-related service organizations, and I enjoyed it immensely. Knew several, became good friends with most of the radio people, certainly the ones in the Charlotte region. Bob Hilker, who used to work at WBT before he formed the company, before my days there. Bill Rollins, who we were in school together. So there was really Carl Venner, who I became good friends with. I remember him being on the campus at Chapel Hill back as a freshman. I think exactly the same age. He probably don't want to admit to being as old as I am, but I think we're close to it anyhow. I may have him edged by a couple months, but anyway, I thoroughly enjoyed it and learned a lot. Wade didn't waste time. Our meetings were valuable meetings. We learned something. I learned something every time I was at a meeting with broadcasters, and furthermore enjoyed it, including a trip to Hawaii. We took it, which was a venture in itself. The plane was supposed to leave Greensboro, charter flight, like at 9 a.m. one day. Well, we were all there. I had two of my children going with me, not even teenagers at the time. And so we got to Greensboro. The plane, something was wrong with the door, so they had to order a new door or whatever it was. So finally, I came back to Charlotte. I called a plane back to Charlotte and left my family there at the airport, worked, and got on a plane and went back there. So we finally got out of there, I forget, 6 or 7 o'clock at night. Then we got to Oakland, and we broke down again.
Oh, my gosh.
So we were sleeping literally in the causeways there. But we finally got to Hawaii and had a great time, and so from that point of view, it was. But being with all the folks there, it was. I'd say the competitiveness disappeared, and fellowship replaced it, and so it was a good experience there as well.
Well, in addition to being the North Carolina Association of Broadcast President, I believe that was in 1976, you're a recipient of their Distinguished Service Award, and in 2003, you were inducted into the Hall of Fame, and at the same time, a couple of your friends also gained that honor, Mr. Jim Goodman and Charlie Rose.
Well, life is a mystery, and this is one of the mysteries, how I got in that group, but a delightful mystery, I might add, and I'm grateful for being considered in the league with those type people. Jim Goodman and I go back a long ways, and I still tell the story about his Uncle Fred, who was running RAL before he got there. To me, it's one of the all-time great stories, and I repeat it quite often. There was the News and Observer did a Tar Heel of the Week article, and one week it was on Fred Fletcher, and they asked Fred, what's going to happen when your father dies? And Fred's response, maybe slightly paraphrased, was, when Papa dies, if Papa dies, I'll never forget that. So I still use that story a lot. I think Jim Goodman. I have the utmost respect for. He is the ultimate and quality broadcaster, and happily, he's so strong that he's been able to ward off the big guys coming in with all their leverage, because he runs he's always ahead of the curve on technology. The news operation is second to none in the country, regardless of market size. So I have tremendous respect for him and Barbara, and I consider the fact that we're colleagues in the same business is a real privilege for me.
Well, he has great respect for you too, and the thing that I have heard him say many times about running WRAL in reference to WBTV was if he wanted to know how to make his station better, he'd go see what WBTV was doing and try and hire some of their people.
I can't think of a higher compliment.
That's a high compliment, you know.
Yeah, very high compliment, because they still are, and he changes network, and the new network goes up and the former network goes down. I mean, that's just been proven in the Raleigh-Durham market with the new CBS station I put on the air when I was running Outlet. I bought that station.
That was part of Outlet Communications.
I bought that from Mr. Beasley for $5 million, and got the NBC affiliation. And it was a struggle because of Jim, and of course TVD was also a well-run company. When Cap Cities, they were just, I assume it still is. I don't mean to imply that they're not now, but I don't see it as often, except when I'm in the Triangle area there. But he's but that combination, that Raleigh-Durham market is quite a challenging market, and for Jim to stay out front so long is very unusual in this business or any other business I know of.
Very remarkable. And let's talk a little more about you. Not only have you been honored by the North Carolina Association of Broadcasters, you've served on the CBS Television Affiliates Board.
I did.
And have many friends throughout the business, which we talked about. And you received an Emmy, a Lifetime Achievement Award from the National Academy of Television Arts and Sciences,
Again,
which very high honor.
Well, again, you question whether you deserve it or not, but I certainly was flattered to do it, and I was particularly flattered that I was introduced by a fabulous person, Frances Preston, who was, she was president of BMI, Broadcast Music Inc., but started out in broadcasting herself, and so I was highly honored. I was particularly pleased that that my former company, Jefferson Pilot, provided their private plane to fly my family and me to Nashville. I thought that was quite a nice thing to do, and so as I said, lucky is not an overused word in my thing. I think I've been very fortunate.
So my last question, Jim, is, we've heard a remarkable story, as only you can tell today, about many things that have happened circumstantially, and you've taken great advantage of and done so much for so many, and done so much in the broadcasting business. What's next for Jim Babb?
Well, I am in the final stages. The box is behind you over there, so a couple of weeks from now I probably wouldn't be here to do this, not in this location anyhow. I have a lot of interest. Fortunately, I have a fabulous, beautiful family. I'm so fortunate that 4 of my daughters live in Charlotte, within 5 minutes of me, 5 minutes to the north and 5 minutes to the south. I love being with them. 4 of my 6 grandchildren live in Charlotte, though they don't live here much anymore. One just graduated from college, and another one will be a junior in college, and another one will be a senior in college next year. And the 4th one would be a freshman, but she's going to do a gap year. She just graduated from Hotchkiss in Connecticut, so she's been gone. The downside is my son and his beautiful wife and my 2 Connecticut grandchildren are living Old Greenwich, Connecticut, and he works in the city. He travels all the time, including to Charlotte. So I got to find time to get up there more. We're blessed that we get to see our Charlotte family quite often. I mean, we do a lot of things together, especially getting half-price hamburgers on Tuesday night. But we, one of my children, Laura Babb Grace, and her husband Mike Grace have a home. Well, our homes are next door to each other in the mountains, so obviously we get to see them quite a bit.
Wow.
And that's great. But I really miss my nearly 14-year-old grandson in Connecticut. Is a fabulous little athlete. I mean, he pound for pound as good as any athlete I've ever seen, particularly in football and basketball, but especially so in baseball. And I haven't seen him play baseball this year. I got to go to Cooperstown a couple of years ago, but he's going to go to high school next year, and I'm sad to say I don't get to see him quite nearly enough. So I'm gonna get a room in a good motel up there and spend a lot more time out there. Though they now have a new home and an in-laws room, I understand. I'm gonna test that out pretty soon. I have a lot of community interest, and I don't want to be on any more boards. I am bored with boards, and I don't like to be on something and not go to meetings because they're meeting for a purpose. I'm still involved with a couple organizations in Charlotte. I plan to be very involved in politics going forward. I think we have got to work hard to get good people to run for office. I don't care what color they are, what color whether Republican, Democrat, Independent, Libertarian, Green Party. I don't care. I have preferences. I think we could be at a leadership crisis stage in our political lives, and so I'm going to spend what little assets I have and time I have to try to find good people to run for office. I happily have found several, and I'm going to be doing whatever I can to see if they get elected this year. And again, from both parties. I think I think the needs transcend party loyalty, partisanship, and I want my children, and they're all active, incidentally. Of course, I have all adult children, but also my grandchildren will start getting involved, and I've been going to various events with me and seeing it. My grandson, Chapel Hill, is very, very interested in public life, and he's been to several events with me too. So I'm glad that they have an interest, and I don't try to push them in any direction. I'm happy to say they usually follow Mary Lou and my direction, but not because we insist on it. So those are the things I'm primarily interested in.
Well, we want to thank you so much for taking time this afternoon to speak with us and share such great stories about how you came about and got your education, and all the interesting people, and how that all grew and blossomed, and it was the right place at the right time, but it was also extremely intelligent and talented people that you spoke about, and yourself, that made things as great as they were. Thank you so much for everything that you
Thank
did.
you, Mike. Thank you,
Appreciate it.
Susan.